let me also start with the brief recap from the last session, right? So as you remember, last time on Tuesday, we were talking about various data transformation initiatives that the companies are starting. And what we have discussed is that one of the common asset that needs to be in place, that the customer needs to have access to be able to be successful in those journeys, is access to the right data, right? Just to make proper decisions, just to properly navigate the planning and properly prepare for the projects, right? And what we were looking at closer was the modernization project, and we were discussing briefly at which stages access to the data is so critical, right? And how the advanced scanners and EDC with data lineage can improve the execution and can improve and enhance the way how organizations can go through the modernization projects, right? We were talking about what is critical during the inception phase, right? How, first of all, how to scope the project, how to validate what is in front of us, to be able to properly assign the resources, to be able to properly define the timeline, right? We were talking about the planning, that the Big Bang approach is not something that we are recommending, right, for each and every project. That's why what we would like to get during the project is to properly prioritize the phases, right, to be able to split the entire scope, which might be pretty huge, right, to do this step by step, right, to deliver quick value for the business and then further enhance based on that, right? So that's why we need to be properly aware about the entire environment, and we need to know each and every process, at least on the high level, to be able to properly split it, right, to put it into the appropriate bucket and to do this in the right order to deliver the value we are expecting to get at the end, right? And then we were also discussing that once everything is started, then another challenge is how to execute it and how to validate that we have, how to measure that we have modernized our environment in a way we wanted it to be, right? So we were looking at various options, how we can, first of all, validate what has been done through the data lineage, right? And we were looking at the state before and state after in the two different technologies, and we were discussing how we can potentially compare whatever we see on the diagram to be able to do this, to do the matching, right? If all of the transformation chains have been moved from one environment to another. Of course, as we were also discussing, every modernization project is not equal to one-to-one migration, right? Because we always do some enhancements, we always do some changes. We are changing, for example, the source systems because we are moving them, for example, to the cloud from the on-premise solutions, right? So there are a number of different changes that needs to be applied on the transformation landscape to make the modernization project successful. But at the same time, if we have proper tooling that allows us to do some automated verification, right? Maybe not automated, that derives as accelerators to validate the results, it is extremely important, right? Because we can properly validate what has been done, how it has been done, if all of the transformation chains has been covered, if something is still missing, if something has been added too much to the project. If, for example, we want to clean some of the processing because we don't need everything in the new platform, then we can also focus on those elements which are only critical, and we can leave everything what is not needed anymore in the old platform, right? So we were discussing this, and what we were looking at are the capabilities around the Microsoft Stack solutions, right? We were looking at the data lineage diagrams and the Metadex advanced scanners capabilities around integrational services, analytical services, reporting services, including some procedures, right? And together with that, we were looking at another angle where we were having the Azure Data Factory, where we were having Power BI with some cloud data lakes in the picture, right? So we were looking at two different technology stack, but at the same time, what I was showing you is that the same level of details, the same granularity of data can be nicely exposed to the end users. And the good thing is that once it is properly configured, once the metadata is loaded, then there is no need to have extensive technical knowledge about each and every technology to properly understand what is going on in the environment, right? That's why the validations or any analysis can be done by the analyst, and the involvement of pure IT department is not needed anymore, right? So this simplifies the picture and makes the whole operational work more effective, right? So that's what we were discussing last time. So what we will be looking at today is, as you remember, during the presentation, we were mentioning that there are two very typical modernization paths, right? So customers, that's what we are observing on the market, right? There are customers that are moving from the on-prem Microsoft solutions into the Microsoft stack, Microsoft cloud solutions, right? At the same time, what we have also seen is that there are a number of customers which are using appliances, like Teradata, where the whole processing is done over there, but they want to also leverage the capabilities and functionalities of the cloud platforms, and they are moving towards to the lakes, right? And they are shifting their processing from the Teradata platforms into, for example, into the Snowflake platform, where they can leverage and better integrate with those types of storages, right? So what we will be looking at today, and that's what we will start from, is I will show you our capabilities around those technologies, right? So we know the concept, we know how this data lineage and EDC can improve and can help with those modernization projects. So right now it's just a matter to be aware what types of capabilities are in place to be able to mix these capabilities whenever it is needed, right? Because what you need to be aware is that we are showing the typical modernization paths, right? But there is no limitation here, right? So if, for example, the customer will decide that they want to move from Microsoft stack into the Snowflake, that's fine, right? Because we have capabilities in the Microsoft stack and we have capabilities in Snowflake, right? The same approach can be utilized, right? It doesn't have to be always Microsoft SQL integrational service into the Azure, right? The same is applicable if the customer would decide to return back from Snowflake into the Teradata, right? The capability is in place. So the same approach can be utilized. The only thing that it's good to be aware of is what types of capabilities Informatica delivers to be able to play with it, right? To be able to build appropriate chain for your benefit, right? To validate what type of modernization project the customer is trying to start, and then to pick up appropriate set of scanners, build a proper solution for that, to use exactly the same approach and to accelerate the process exactly the same way as we were discussing last time. So today what we will be looking at, and that's what we will start, as I said, we will be looking at the Teradata and Snowflake. So let's start with the Teradata stack. So let's assume that we have in our environment, we have a Teradata, number of different Teradata things loaded into the advanced scanner, right, into the EDC, right? And we know that one of the tables that is somewhere not like this, purchase report. One of the tables that is somewhere in the picture is customer purchase report, right? And we would like to learn a bit more about it, right? Because this might be our reporting table, right, where the some BI reports are built on top of it, and we would like to validate how it is getting populated and what types of elements from our Teradata environment are utilized to make that happen, right? So let's click on that customer purchase report. Of course, we are getting automatically a list of columns that are underlying in the table. But the most important thing that we will be once again looking at is a data lineage, right? Where we would like to get full picture about the processing that is being applied in our environment. And once again, the same way like we did for Microsoft Stack, the same way like we did for Azure, right? Data Factory. What we are getting on the very high level is resource level lineage, which shows you how the data flows through a number of different elements, right? And depending how the metadata has been organized during loading process, what you can get at this level is even application level lineage, right? Because if, for example, your every resource will be tied to a logical application, right, where it is tied to a specific functionality in the transformation landscape, then what you will get here is you will be able to see on the logical application level, what are the interactions between various systems, right? You will be able to see which application is producing the data, which one is consuming the data. So you will be able to see all of those types of different relationships, which might be very important and critical from even your operational perspective, right? So what we can see on this screen immediately is that this table, which is stored in the Teradata database, right, is populated through some mload operations. Mload is nothing else like the Teradata utility that allows you to push data from files into the tables in a very quick way, right? So very fast operation, right? To load data from files into the tables. What we can see is that there are some operations that happens on the Teradata level. Most likely there are some views, procedures, the typical operations that you can execute on the database engine level. There are some BTEC scripts where you can have some external processes, external scripts, which are doing some extra magic on the data, either by interacting with some files or directly with the tables. So all of those elements are nicely supported by the advanced scanner, right? If there are any Teradata macros in the pictures, those are also nicely handled by the scanner, and you would be able to see everything the same way on the data lineage diagrams, right? So what we always emphasize is that every technology that is being supported delivers exactly the same granularity of data and delivers the data, the information about the metadata in an exactly the same way, right? Just not to confuse. Column level plus transformations, just to have full picture about the data processing. So what we can do right now, of course, we can once again, like we did before, we can expand all just to see the full data flow. And we can dive deeper to better understand what has happened in our environments, right? So we can see that this customer purchase report has been built on top of the view, which is customer purchase view, which is stored in the Teradata environment. And there is also a temporary table called #tmp sp create report temp customer purchase report temp, right? So there is a temporary table that has been involved in the processing. So what we can automatically see is that if there are some temporary tables, then most likely there is a stored procedure behind the scene triggered that is doing some magic with the data, right? That is taking the data from some tables, from some sources, right? And building some intermediate storages that are later on used by the further processing, right? So what we can do automatically, if we would like to see, okay, but what has happened here, like we did before, we can turn on the transformations, right, where all of those orange bubbles shows up to show you automatically where any potential transformation has been hidden in the first picture. We can click on this orange bubble and we can enter the detailed lineage information, right, where we have not only the core assets being represented and exposed, like here and here, but also in the middle, we have the information about the real processing that has been applied. So what we can see here is that there is sp create report temp procedure. That's the procedure definition, right? Here we have procedure instance. So as you can see, the difference between those levels of the model, because this might be also very important, because this shows how we are dealing with a code, right? Is as you can see in our model, we have two levels, right? The first level represents something which is called procedure definition. The very next level represents something which is called procedure instance. And this procedure instance has, as you can see in the name, those brackets at the end. Here we have empty bracket, which means that this procedure was not taking any input parameters on an input side, right? But what you can imagine is that there might be various more generic procedures which are behaving in a slightly different way depending on the input parameters that are being passed to those procedures, right? In such situations, what you will have in the model, you will have in our metadata model, you will have one procedure definition, because still this is exactly the same procedure that has been stored and defined inside of our database catalog, but at the same time, this procedure has been used in a various different ways, right? Which means that the lineage that is being produced by specific usage of the procedure might be totally different, right? In such situation, you can have one procedure definition and multiple procedure definition instances, which are doing different data movements from left to right, depending on how it has been triggered, right? So even such situations are nicely handled by the advanced scanners and the EDC. And below the stored procedure definition, stored procedure instance, we have a statement where you can see that at line number 3, in a column number 1, right, just to properly position the element inside of the stored procedure. This is also very important because sometimes if the technical users are looking at the data lineage, right, they want to somehow see the correlation between the metadata and the real code that they have developed, right? In such situation, what they can look at is that, of course, whenever possible, right, we are trying to expose our best knowledge about where it has been identified, right? So in this situation, this procedure, this statement has been captured at line number 3 in this particular procedure, right? Why I'm saying that we are trying to expose our best knowledge? Because in many situations, especially if the code includes another things, right? For example, it is more tied to a SAS base or some other scripting languages, right? You can imagine that there is a script, and in the middle you have include, where another file is being sorry, included in this particular place, right? Which means that what happens at the execution level is that the content of that file is being pasted into this specific place, which means that the original number of lines of the parent process is automatically extended with this extra content, right? Which means that if you will still count those lines, there will be no matching between the parent process and those line numbers, because you have already included something from outside to this code, right? So in such situations, this line numbering might be not properly providing you the linkage between the source code and the metadata. But if we are dealing with the stored procedures, with code which is not including anything from outside, rather calling something from outside, then those line numbering will be matching, fully matching with the source code. And what we can see here is that there is a statement which is doing the magic. Of course, once again, like we did before, we can click on that link, we can learn a bit more about it, we can see calculations which are column level transformations, right? We can also go to our visualization link. And also for the user benefit, what we are exposing here, as you can see, is a source statement text, right? Which means that there is always an information about what has been processed, right? If it, like here, right? But the problem, of course, we can show all, but in some situations, the code might be too big, right? Because you might be dealing with pretty large scripts which have, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 lines. And of course, not everything will be nicely exposed here, and it will be difficult to read it, right? So sometimes maybe if you would like to see the code, especially if you're a technical user, you can go to the original source code to do this. But here, what we are also trying to do, we are trying to expose the information about the source code as well, right? But the most important thing, because nobody expects you to read the text mode, right? In the text mode, the processing, we have the visualization link, where once again, we can see that the composed version of our code, once we are, of course, logged in. And here, as you can see, we have the same information like we had before, right? So we can see that there is a SQL statement where the source statement code is also being exposed, right? But we can double click on the code just to go into the table, into the components level, where we can see all of those joins, all of the where clauses nicely exposed. We can go to the column level. We can double click on any item just to see the chain, the transformation chain in the decomposed transformation unit, right? This is very important. What is also important, and this might be especially important from the modernization projects, right? Because some customers were already asking about it, is that, as you can see in this decomposed picture, which is an extra technical information, right? This will be rather not used by the business user or analyst. This will be used by the technical users. But what you can also see here is that even the type of the join is nicely exposed. So this is pretty cool thing, right? Because without leaving the environment, you can double check if this is the inner join, left, right, outer, whatever it is, right? So from my experience, where we were showing to our customers one time the code, right? We were exposing those diagrams. The customer was slightly surprised seeing that they are using cross joins in their environments, right? Because they were not supposed to do this in the environment. They were supposed to modify it, right? To not to not do the Cartesian joints, right? But they were still having those inside the environment. And when we were showing up those diagrams to them, first of all, they were questioning that the metadata that we are exposing is not correct. But when they looked into their code, they were surprised to see that they didn't modify the code in each and every place, right? So that was the clear information to them. Okay, so there is some work in front of us to validate what we did so far, to modify it according to our standards, right? So even such information is nicely exposed, and you can see it in a graphical way in the EDC directly, right? So let's turn back to our previous picture. So let's go back to our lineage, right? And let's go back to our initial screen, right? So we have, once again, so we did some analysis. We did check that there is a procedure that is doing some magic between those sources and these targets. We have seen the decomposed version of it, right? And we could continue the journey with some following elements, right? Like, for example, if we would like to see what has happened here, right? Because here we see there is an mload, right? So let's see how this mload has been constructed, right? We can once again click on the orange bubble. We can see that there is indeed an mload operation. We can go to the statement just to see how it has been designed, right? And of course, we can see the source code, or we can go to the visualization just to repeat exactly the same exercise. So as you can see, regardless of the type of the technology, regardless of the components in that technology, as long as something is supported, you are getting very precise information about the logic, and you can clearly understand what has happened, right? So you can clearly see how the processing lineage diagram for those, right? And can you hear me? Because it showed me that there is some unstable I have some unstable internet connection.
Yeah, you've been breaking up a little bit.
Okay, but right now it's better?
Yeah, it is working.
Okay, perfect. So here we have the column level information, right? And whenever we want to dive deeper to see the transformations, like we were discussing last time, right, we can click on the orange bubble, enter the detail lineage, just to see what has happened in particular place, right? What the expression has been applied on the data to deliver the value. So this is the Teradata, right? And out of the Teradata, it's worth to mention that what we are supporting is our stored procedures, our views, our macros, our utilities like mload, fast export, etc. So there are a number of different things from Teradata which are nicely supported, like BTEC scripts, right? Where we can deliver the full insight about the processing to the end user in an automatic fashion, right? So this is the Teradata. So right now, let's assume that, and as you can see, this is the information that you can leverage while starting the modernization, right? You can clearly identify the scope. You can clearly validate what is in front of you, what types of elements from Teradata are utilized to deliver the value, that is responsible for the processing. And one additional funny story, right? Also from the experience, right, is that someone could say that, okay, but if I have my IT department, I know everything in my environment, right? And usually this is more or less correct, but not always, right? So what I remember from my experience, that we were starting a project where the customer was supposed to trigger the migration project, right, from one environment to another. And when they started with the data lineage, they were shocked, to be honest, that they have at this stage, it was a Teradata, right? They were shocked that they are using in their processing the Teradata appliance, right? They were 100% sure that the only database that they have in their environment is Oracle, is SQL Server, that their processing is done in the particular ETL platform, right? And they were supposed to migrate that part of the code only, right? That was their plan, right? When we delivered the data lineage, right, and we were showing them the diagrams, they were surprised to see that there is something more in the picture, right? Because during the deployment project, someone asked, okay, guys, so right now, please tell us how to connect your Teradata box, right? And their automatic question was, but what Teradata box? So we told them, okay, guys, this is the connection details from this ETL platform. You are connecting to some Teradata tables, right? So please tell us what it is, right? And it turned out that this was something that was developed quite some time ago, right? And everyone forgot about it, right? It was running properly without any problems. So nobody was maintaining it. It was just running, right? And at some point when they triggered the migration process, they were surprised that there is another piece of information that they need to also deliver to make the whole process complete, right? So you can also, during this inception and planning phase, you can identify some very surprising information that might be huge benefit when planning, right? Just not to be surprised. It's always better to be prepared, not to be surprised during the project, right? So that's the Teradata, right? Let's move forward, right? So this is the Teradata. So right now let's switch to the Snowflake, right? As you can of course imagine, imagine exactly the same information will be delivered, right? So the only difference between Teradata and Snowflake is that there is a different database flavors behind the scene use, right? Of course, the Snowflake is a slightly different beast, right? Because it is using the inside of the procedural languages, it is using JavaScript, etc. So it is totally different development experience, right? But at the same time, from the metadata harvesting point of view, there is not much difference, right? So you are connecting to the particular database, you are pointing to appropriate schema, to appropriate set of procedures, views, whatever you want to process, right? You are scanning it, you are loading this into the EDC, and you are exploring the lineage, right? The same way of work, right? The same approach, regardless of the technology, right? And just to prove that, right? So let me find something from the Snowflake, right? There is a view called let's find first the Snowflake DB. Let's find the resource. So we have a resource. So we have a number of different things inside of the resource. There is a procedure. There are, as you can see, there are some pipes. There are some stages, right? So there are a number of different things that have been captured by our scanner, right? Which are very typical to Snowflake, not necessarily to other technologies, right? Because you will not find pipes inside of the Teradata. However, at the same time, you will not find multi-load or fast load inside of the Snowflake, right? Different approaches to navigate to the data or to link the data, but it is delivered in an appropriate into the EDC catalog as it should be, right? So right now, let's try to start with our view. We have a view which is called order details. Let's draw the lineage, right? And what we can see is a similar diagram. In this situation, the whole processing happens purely in the Snowflake, right? Which means that it is loaded into the single resource. There are no any external utilities like multi-load, like BTEC scripts. There is nothing like this in the Snowflake here, right? In this picture. So we have just a single resource. But if we will expand all, you will see how those pieces are connected, right? You will be able to see how the flow has been designed inside of the Snowflake, right? We can see that there is a view which is built on top of the 3 tables. Those 3 tables are populated out of the following upstream, which is on the left side, right? And right now, of course, what we can do, we can trigger exactly the same analysis as we did before, right? We can show the transformations, right? We can expose the transformations, and we can dive deeper into our logic, right? So we can, for example, pick up customer just to see what happened at this stage, right? Where we can see that there is a SQL statement which is doing some data manipulation between source and targets, right? Or we can, for example, if we're more interested into the address, we can click on that and one comment here, right? So what you can see in this particular place, which is slightly different comparing to what we have seen before, is that this particular table is populated through 2 different processes, right? As you can see, the same table is being populated through the Snowflake DB processing. So most likely there is either a view or stored procedure, whatever is inside of the database level being developed, right? Or there is also something which has been done in the script, right? Which means that there is a script which is doing some extra data movements between the sources and targets, right? So depending what you would like to explore, you have to click on any of those items. Like, for example, if I click on my Snowflake DB, what I will be able to see is that what happened on the database level, right? So I can see that there is a validate order, which is moving the data from customer row to the address, right? If I will click on the script, what I'll find is that there is slightly more complex processing, which is triggering some validate orders, which is having some stages in the middle, right? So there are a number of different things which are included in the processing to deliver my data, right? And what I can do, of course, I can dive deeper into each and every element in those particular places. For example, if I would like to see, okay, so what has happened here? I have one ultimate source. There is also probably some result set from validate order, which is being used, and on the source side, there are some intermediate objects which are involved in the processing, and there is a landing zone, which is my table address at the end, right? If I would like to see what has happened to the particular column, and what I want to show you here is that there is no need to do. You can dive deeper into each and every level in every place, right? Which means that it is not required to go back to the initial screen, to the entire holistic view to go to the column level, because if you would like to dive into the column level in the detailed lineage, right, you can also do this, right? Let's assume that I want to do this. I want to see how the address lines have been calculated, right? I can check those two columns. I can click OK. And then what I'll see is how this has been designed in particular places, right? And I can see how the data has been moved from various elements into my landing zone, right? And whenever, of course, some logic has been applied, like here, two columns are entering into a single item in my calculation landscape, I can click on that guy, and I can see clearly that there is a concatenation between those two things, right? So I'm concatenating the address street, space, and address number just to get another full address line, right? So I can see easily what has been done with my data, the same way like we did before, right? So let's go back to our initial screen. We can do the same validation. We can do the same analysis again and again, regardless what the technology is, right? So to summarize the modernization and any digital transformation initiatives, right? What is very important to make them successful is, first of all, especially when you're doing the modernizations, is very important to know your current state, right? To know your environment well enough to be able to prepare for the project, right? So the more you know upfront, the less number of surprises you will hit along the way when executing the project, which means that the less impacted will be your timeline, the less impacted will be your budgeting, the less impacted will be your cost, right? Because if you will identify all of the things that you want to handle, right, then you can better prepare your budgeting, then you can be better prepared for the execution, right? So this is the place where definitely the advanced scanners and ADC can accelerate the process, right? Because we can help you to build an environment where you can harvest metadata, load it into the ADC, load it into the catalog, and you can clearly see what you currently have, and then prepare for the migration for any initiative which is tied to that data, to that processes, right? Because you are well prepared, you know what you will be dealing with later on, right? So this is extremely important at the beginning of the process, but it is also extremely important on the way, because it helps you to execute and validate the results, right? Regardless what the journey you are on, if you are starting from Snowflake to Teradata, if you are starting from Oracle to Snowflake, if you are starting from Microsoft to Azure, it doesn't matter, right? As long as the technologies are supported through the advanced scanners and through the Informatica platform, then you can be sure that you have enough tooling, you have proper tooling in place to be able to compare and to be able to validate what has been done so far, if everything has been captured, right? Because you can have those lineage diagrams side by side, and you can validate if everything what you were expecting to migrate, if all of the stage one priorities have been properly moved from technology one to technology two. And of course, as it always comes, there might be different approaches with the modernization, right? You can handle it vertically or horizontally, right? You can either pick up the full end-to-end data flow and focus on that to support the full processing for the particular report, like we did last time, the exercise we did last time. Or, for example, what you can also do, you can pick up, for example, few reports or few tables which are critical from the business perspective, but you can tackle the same problem vertically, right? Which means that you are validating in the particular, for example, you are starting from the BI perspective, right? So you are first of all identifying those reports, and then you are finding where those reports are reading the data from, right? And you are first migrating the reporting layer, right? Just to be stitched to exactly the same sources, and then you are continuing to the left side by moving and modernizing those additional technologies by switching those sources, etc. Right? So you can tackle it from a different angles, but in each and every approach, the same information is needed, right? You need to have access to the right data. You need to have proper understanding about what you currently have to be able to properly trigger this exercise and to be able to properly execute that exercise. Okay, so this is the modernization projects, and this is the how data lineage can improve, right? One additional element that is, let me go back here. One additional initiative that we observe that is quite important from the customer perspective is either internal regulatory or regulatory compliance, whatever requires some extra information about how particular reports, how particular data has been calculated to deliver such insights, right? So what we have observed over time is that there are two different approaches our customers are validating, right? One of those is, okay, so we have enough knowledge in our department. We will engage few people. Those people will be responsible for that. They will deliver the full insight, and they will deliver, I don't know, through the Excel spreadsheet or for some documents, the full information, how the particular reports or critical data elements are calculated. Okay, this is feasible, but first of all, this is extremely error-prone task, because if something is done manually, then it is as good as people are careful of building that. Another thing is to maintain this process, right? Because of course you can do this one time, right? When you can spend and allocate enough time to build that knowledge, right? But whenever your environment will be changing, and it will be changing, right? Your information that has been already prepared is not up to date anymore, right? And you can either keep investing in that just to keep it synchronized with the operational systems, or at some point you can find out that whatever you have prepared, I don't know, a month or 2 months ago is no longer valid, because your system has been changed so much that it is not even close to it, right? So either you are treating this as a continuous investment, which is pretty huge investment to keep it up to date, or you can find another approach. And another approach is to once again utilize the catalog like EDC with the scanners that can deliver this knowledge in an automatic fashion, right? And what we have found is that in many situations, one of the most challenging, I would say, environments are the one that are utilized by the risk departments, right? And risk departments, guys, love SaaS base. So because SaaS base delivers pretty nice functionalities, nice modules to do the magic when it comes to the analytics, right? They can build their own models, they can build their own processing to slice and dice their data the way they want to deliver the reporting that is nicely tied to their needs, right? So SaaS-based is something that risk departments love, but at the same time, SaaS-based is an extremely complex language to be parsed. But the good thing is that the advanced scanner handle SaaS-based, right? So we are fully aware about its complexity due to its heavy parameterization, because it's pretty rare situation where SaaS-based code is static, right? It happens, but in most situations, this is parameterized, right? Some parameters are being calculated internally in the SaaS, and then there is no problem with those. But some parameters are being delivered from outside, and those needs to be somehow captured, right? Another complexity when it comes to the SaaS base is SaaS is using extensively, and SaaS users are using extensively SaaS macros, which are delivering great benefits, but at the same time, it is delivering extra complexity when it comes to the understanding the code, right? Because you have SaaS macro is nothing else like a generic piece of code that that can be used in multiple places, and when applied with some parameters, it's doing different magic, and it can also generate part of the code based on those parameters, which sometimes are derived from the outside, and then only this generated code is later on triggered and is delivering the value for the business and for the metadata as well, right? So we are fully aware about those complexities, right? And what we are proposing our customers are few approaches how you can tackle it, right? First of all, when your code is more or less static, right? And your code is just parameterized by something that is either also static or is resolved by the code itself, then you can simply parse SaaS-based scripts and you are fine, right? You can parse those scripts. You can load the knowledge into the EDC. When your code is dynamic, right, where the static code analysis cannot be successful because there is not enough information inside of the static code to get full insight about what has been done on the execution level, then what we are proposing our customers is something that to utilize, instead of the SaaS-based scripts, utilize SaaS-based execution logs. And of course, those logs needs to be properly prepared, not manually, which is a good thing, but there has to be few elements turned on the SaaS level to make those logs usable, right? Like mlogic, like mprint, just to have all of those dynamic macros nicely resolved, and to have all of those boundaries of those macros nicely exposed as well inside of those scripts, right? Or inside of those logs, to be able to, in the first step, to cleanse that log on our side automatically, to retrieve out of that log this useful SaaS-based information that can be later on parsed as a real SaaS-based code and deliver the metadata required into the EDC. So that's what we are doing, and we have a number of different customers which are already utilizing it. There are financial institutions which are having which are doing some modeling inside of the SaaS, and they are able to deliver the required information either for the internal reasons, right, to be able to maintain it properly and to enhance it as on an ongoing basis, or to deliver the proper reporting for the compliance reason, right, where they have to do this. There is no question if they will do this. Sometimes there is a mandatory need to do that, right? And this is how those companies, how those organizations are complying with those needs, right? So right now, let me show you how we are dealing with the SaaS code, right? And here, what we will be doing, we will start slightly unusual because we will start with the source code. I don't want to get you bored, guys, here, don't get me wrong, but I want to show you what is the difficulty by looking at the SaaS code, which, in fact, whatever we'll be looking at right now, is pretty simple. Trust me, it is just hundreds of lines of code, while the typical scripts can have thousands, right? And there might be a number of such scripts, right? Like hundreds or even thousands of such scripts in the environment. But I wanted to show you how does the typical SaaS code looks like. And then later on, I would like to switch you to the EDC just to show you how easy it is to validate in EDC what has been done in a text mode, right? So what we have here in the SaaS-based code, we have 3 libraries. This is the way how in SaaS code you can connect logically to various of different sources, right? Either to the SaaS-based libraries or to the databases, like in this first line, to the Oracle, right? Where you are connecting to the particular database to read or write the data because this is the bidirectional bidirectional connection to this database, right? And then we have a number of different things, like some parameters being defined, and there we have something which are called steps inside of the SAS code. Each step is our unique transformation unit, right, where specific operation is being applied. Like here, we are building stage customer out of the Oracle customer, right? So we are simply moving the data that has been found inside of the Oracle table into the SAS library data set, which will be inside of the stage library, right? And then we are doing some additional things with some filtering. Then there is a prod SQL where we are triggering some statement on the database side. There are some sorting operation, some assignment operation, merge operation, right? So various transformations on the way. What is also very important here is that, as you can see, at some point, we have a macro that is being defined, right? And this can be defined either internally in the script or outside. In many situations, our customers are having their dedicated libraries where all of those macros are nicely defined, and then there are just linked, included into the script on the way, right? So this is one of the elements where all of those line numbering might be slightly damaged by those inclusions from outside, right? But here we have a macro that is called calculate prime cast, right? Which is taking some parameters on the input side, very typical, by transaction number, wanted target, default target, and depending on those data, as you can see, there is a proper condition which, based on those input values, is either populating data to the wanted target, which comes from the parameter as well, right? Or to the default target, which also is a parameterized value, right? So as you can see, this macro without input parameters tells nothing what is going on, right? Because it is using some inputs, and based on those inputs is creating some outputs, and we don't know what those outputs are. But whenever those macros are being invoked, whenever those are called, like we have in the line number 63, right? We can see that here we have some numbers being assigned, right? We have that inside of this step, there is a macro being called with the value of by 25,000, where the transaction number is 20, where the wanted target is prime customers and default target is common customers, and those will be created, right? And then there is some ongoing processing, and at the end we are building either prime customers or discount offering CSV files, right? So as you can see, couple of different steps with some macros being invoked, with macro being defined, right? So let's see how the same code is visualized inside of EDC. So let me go to the EDC. Let me find something which is called SAS demo. This is our resource for the SAS base, where the SAS base has been loaded. And what we can find here inside of this resource is there are a number of different steps. Those are those unique transformation units, right? There are some work data sets and data sets. There is a differentiation between those two, because in SAS base, it is, due to its nature, there are permanent data sets which are stored inside of the SAS libraries, and there are work libraries which are nothing else like a temporary storages that are stored on, that are used only during the execution phase, right? And those are differentiated here because it allows you to later on the lineage diagram to filter out those intermediate stages, which might be overwhelming for the business users, right? Because usually business users care about the data sets, permanent data sets, but they don't care about those intermediate stages. And when we have two separate dedicated object types, you can easily filter it out through the classical EDC filtering, just to reduce the complexity of the diagrams. We have two libraries, we have one program, right? So let's go to the data sets and let's draw a lineage for customer trans daily. Let's see how this has been involved in the processing. Of course, we have some informations about the columns. Once again, here we have some business titles. Those business titles are loaded through the library. If it is being defined in the SAS-based library, those business titles will be also pushed into our EDC catalog, just to have exactly the same information as it is exposed in SAS, right? We can draw lineage and impact, and then we can see where this particular data set is located in our transformation journey, right? So as you can see, it has both upstream and downstream. On the upstream side, there are just 2 hops. On the downstream side, there are plenty more. So what we can do, we can of course expand all just to see how the data is moved along the way inside of the environment. And what I will show you here is that this metadata has been loaded in a slightly different way comparing what we were looking at before. And there is such option inside of the advanced scanners where you can decide if you like those orange bubbles, right? And you want to have this lineage in the first shot being removed with all of those technical operations, just core assets being invoked, or if you would like to see everything at once in a single diagram. Of course, as you can see, the diagram becomes a bit larger, right? But at the same time, there are no orange bubbles, and you can see each and every hop automatically on the screen, right? And why I'm showing this, especially in the SaaS-based context, because what we have seen is that our SaaS-based customers, some of them are simply preferring this way of exposing the data, right? They want to see all of those temporary objects, all of those SaaS steps being nicely exposed right away, rather than to enter those detailed lineage and those orange metadata, and this can be loaded that way as well. So here we have our lineage where we are studying. Guys, can you confirm if, because it seems that once again I got the message about the internet.
We can hear
you. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we have at the beginning we have our customers trans daily, which is going through the particular SaaS step, and as you can see here we have the number 10, right? Which means that at line number 10 in the script, the following SaaS step has been identified, right? And this is building this customer trans daily stage inside of the stage, and this is moving forward, and at some point we are hitting some extra operations, right? And for example, here we have something which is taking the data from total by customer, and it has been found in line number 63, right? If I will switch back to my original script, what I will find out is that exactly the line that is highlighted here, right? Where we are building something by triggering the calculate prime customer macro, right? So there is a logic which is being done through the macro. So let's return back to EDC. Let's see what has happened in this particular place, right? What I can do, I can click on my guy, I can go to the overview, and I can clearly see that this is exactly the step, right? We have the data common customer prime customer merge, and there is, as you can see, let me go to the visualization link. It will be easier to validate. Once again. Here we have this common customers, and here we have the whole macro, right? So as you can see here, this what has been done inside of the processing, right? So we have the full information, what has been done inside of my step. And if I will go here, you will see that this has been done through the macro, right? You can see that there is the whole string is common customers, prime customer. Then there is if total greater than 25,000 or count greater than 20, then out prime customers, else output is common customer, keep name total count, right? Which means that whatever has been done in this particular place, right, has been picked up. We went to that macro, we have utilized the information about the input parameters, and we have constructed the logic out of the macro and placed it here, right? Which means that we have properly analyzed the macro by taking those input parameters, and we have delivered the final information about the processing. So as you can see, something that might be difficult to read in a text mode can be nicely exposed in the graphical way, because if I would not show you that here is a macro at that place being scanned and analyzed, you would not even see the details, right? As long as you don't go to the visualization link, or you don't go to the text view, you will never capture that there was any macro. You can simply see that out of this table, there are two tables, common customers or prime customers being created, because that's what the macro does. Depending on the input parameters, it is creating one of those two, right? So that's what you can see at this stage, right? And you can continue the journey until the final landing zone is being hit, right? And the beauty in that scenario is that whenever the metadata is being loaded, right, what I can do, I can switch the data lineage context at any point of time, right? For example, if at some point I would like to find out, okay, so I know that this was in the middle of the processing and finally this has been produced as an output, right? But okay, so right now I don't care about this discount offering because that's totally out of my picture. I'm not responsible, I'm not stewarding, I'm not the steward of that file, I don't know what it is, I don't care of it, right? But I would like to see the prime customers only, right? What I can do, I can click on my prime customers, I can regenerate the flow, I can regenerate my diagram focusing on this particular element. I can expand all, and I can see the journey just for the file that I'm responsible for, right? And I can see how this has been designed right now from the end of the processing till the very beginning, including all of the transformations on the way. And going further, if I would like to reduce the details to a particular columns only, like for example, I would like to have just total and name. I don't care about the count because this is purely technical and I don't care of it. I can click on those two. I can click OK. And then I can easily see how the flow is identified, how the flow has been designed in my source technology. And whenever there is any transformation on the way, I will be able to capture it. I will be able to click on it. I will be able to see what has happened in particular place, just to see all of those transformations handy for my benefit. So as you can see, no matter what the technology is, right? We were over those 2 sessions, we were touching a number of different technologies, right? From Microsoft, we were looking at the integrational services, analytical services, reporting services, and SQL Server itself. In the Azure, we were looking at data lakes, ADLS2. We were looking at Amazon S3. We were looking at the Azure Blob. We were looking at the Azure Data Factory. There was also Databricks in the picture. We were looking at the Power BI. Today, we're looking at the Teradata with some utilities, with BTEC scripts, with we are looking at the Snowflake. Right now, we are looking at the SaaS base, which is, I would say, very complex technology when it comes to understanding what has happened inside. As you can see, no matter what the technology is, no matter what the journey you want to support, right? The data lineage is something that can deliver great insight into the processing, right? You can see end-to-end holistic view in the environment. And the most important thing is that you can see all of those technologies combined together on a single diagram, right? Those are not disconnected, right? Because in case of the Azure, in case of the Microsoft stack, you have seen multiple technologies on the very same diagram because they were interacting with each other, right? If the technologies are disconnected from the logical and physical perspective, then those lineage diagrams will be disconnected as well, right? But if they are linked together somehow through the common layers like tables, files, whatever it is, right? Then you will see the ongoing flow through those different hops until you are reaching the final landing zone, which might be a report, table, file, whatever it is, right? But you can easily, without knowing, without having much knowledge about the underlying technologies, you can clearly understand what has happened. You can clearly see all of those fancy transformations. You can identify what is your upstream, what is your downstream, and the downstream is nothing else like your impact analysis, right? You can clearly see that in one single platform. And if that's not enough, then through the advanced scanners, you have those extra visualization links where you can dive even deeper to see the decomposed transformation units, where you can see even such details like types of joins inside of the queries, what components were used inside of the SSIS, etc. Right? So you can see very precise and detailed picture about your processing, and it is satisfying the need of business users, which are usually staying on the very high level. They are seeing what are the relations between the core assets. Analysts, which that can dive deeper into the technologies which are responsible for the data movement, and technical users, where they can go into those visualization links to see how the particular process has been designed and developed. So that's what we are delivering. That's what we are providing for the EDC and advanced scanners, and in general, within the whole set of scanners, right? Because those are supplementing each other. You need to remember of that, right? So standard scanners plus advanced scanners are the core base of the tooling that allows you to populate the catalog with the required metadata just to achieve your end goal, which is proper understanding of your transformation landscape to either modernize it, either maintain it, or simply to be able to deliver the insight about the processing to various people in the organization. Okay, so this is something I wanted to show you during those 2 sessions. So let's see if there are any questions right now in the Q&A.
There's a first question about can we build lineage automatically for AWS S3 layers, Denodo and Tableau? So yes, depending on what you are using to move data around between the different layers of S3. For Denodo, we do have a custom scanner out there that you can actually find in the marketplace that will allow you to bring metadata from Denodo. And we also have a out-of-the-box scanner for Tableau that will bring the lineage from the Tableau reports and Tableau workbooks to the source of Tableau. So, yep, that is possible. Next question is it possible to annotate or add your comments to the lineage that EDC generates? So at every single object that is presented in the catalog, you can actually ask questions. You can provide your comments and rating. So yes, in this sense, it is possible. You can also edit descriptions of the objects if there are processes that are being added to the catalog. If you have a SAS program that is ingested in the catalog, you can also change the description, provide more information about those objects that are in the catalog. Next question is, can we build a lineage out of stored procedures and SQL for Snowflake and Redshift automatically? Yes, we do have support for Snowflake stored procedures as well as Redshift. So definitely you can generate lineage out of those technology. For Snowflake, the stored procedures that are written in JavaScript are also supported. Question about difference between normal scanner and advanced scanners. From licensing perspective, normal scanners are available out of the box with the EDC license. For any advanced technologies that needs to be, or advanced scanners that any other technologies that needs to be scanned with advanced scanners, there's need for the customers to procure an additional license. So we invite customers to get in touch with their account team to inquire for those licenses. In terms of technologies, we categorize advanced scanners when we have advanced parsing capabilities, whenever we involve SQL parsing, Python code parsing, SAS code parsing, COBOL, JCL parsing, those technologies that requires additional or involved technologies to actually generate lineage will be categorized as advanced scanners. There's some other technologies like SAP BW for HANA, where the complexity of the metadata that we're extracting as well from the systems makes us categorize those as advanced scanners. We do support for those scanners, even generating lineage for BW queries, which is a very a feature that is high in demand from customers. Next question is, can advanced scanner scan Python or any other language that was used for transformation logic? Yes, Python Python parsing is available as part only today of Databricks notebook scanner. So if you have customers that have Databricks notebooks written in Python and especially PySpark that are using modules like Spark SQL to move the data around, then yes, we do have this capability today. In the future, we'll look at possible expansion of this capability to generic Python that's still in the work.
Any more questions? Okay, so I believe we have covered everything. There are no more questions. Oh, there is something. Using advanced scanner, is there any manual effort from IT requirement? So when it comes to the advanced scanners, you need to configure that, right? So there is what you need to be aware. It is not pressing of single button exercise, right? So definitely you need to connect to appropriate source, and depending on the technology, there might be some extra configuration steps needed, right? So as I was mentioning on Tuesday, this is an iterative process, right? Where you are starting with the bare minimum information you have about your source code. You are defining your connection to the source code that you want to scan, and then you are learning from the execution logs what else needs to be added or what else needs to be enhanced in the configuration to make that successful, right? You can either identify some extra sources that you will need to connect to because there is a reference to an extra database, extra catalog that needs to be added. There might be some missing dependencies, like some extra files that are also referenced that you might not be aware of upfront, that those are also needed and are storing some meaningful information from the processing perspective. So this is an iterative process. So, and in many situations, whenever the scanner is requesting something extra, then those requests need to be handled by the IT people, because IT people knows those things, right? Because if, for example, there is an SSIS and the scanner will be complaining that there is a logical connection key, I don't know, called SQL Server Database 123, then inside of SSIS, the subject matter expert will know what does Microsoft SQL Server Database 123 mean, right? We'll be able to provide the connection string, we'll be able to provide credentials to be able to connect to that database. So yes, IT is involved during the configuration phase because some technical knowledge is needed to stitch the dots to get proper processing in place. And there's one more question. Can we harvest metadata for Informatica MDM and Databricks and build lineage? Yeah, for Databricks, we have a scanner where we are supporting some languages in which the Databricks can be written, right? So we are, as of today, we are supporting the SQL and PySpark, right? So those two are supported. If you're writing in R or some other languages, then this is not supported by the Databricks advanced scanners yet, as of today. When it comes to Informatica MDM, Louis Noel?
Yes, there's a out-of-the-box scanner that is available to scan Informatica MDM. We do generate lineage as well from MDM by looking at the underlying jobs that are written to move the data and load the business entities.
Okay, when it comes to the security for the advanced scanners, so yes, advanced scanners are can connect to the LDAP, which means that you can use your LDAP users and you can grant permissions to the appropriate people. Inside of the advanced scanner, there is a permission framework where you can, I can even show it to you. Let me jump into the advanced scanner just to show it to you. How does it look like? I need to share the screen first. Once again, just stay with me. I need to share that guy. Okay, so inside of the advanced scanner, what you have the permission management framework, where either you can have the built-in users, which can be added through that permission framework, or what you can also do, you can integrate it through the configuration file to your LDAP instance, and then you will see all of those LDAP users and groups exposed here, right? And then once it is exposed here, then for each and every user or each and every group that is being taken from the LDAP, what you can do, you can go to the appropriate user, you can edit roles, first of all, where you can add proper project from the advanced scanner for that user, and for each and every project you can assign proper permissions, right? Either view permission, operator, where the user can execute and not only view the configurations, the developer, where the user can modify the configuration itself, or the owner, where you can create the extra configurations or even destroy the project, right? So there are a number of different levels of permissions that are available here, and this can be assigned for each and every either built-in user or LDAP user that can be taken from the LDAP installation. In use cases where we do not know data flow, can we just parse all the ETL code in Power Center or any other tool and other Python scripts to understand the flow? Yes and no, right? So it depends, right? As usual, unfortunately, because yes, you can. That's not prohibited, right? You can parse particular code. The only problem might appear that if particular process is being invoked from another process, and this parent process is passing some parameter values to that child process, right? Then you are losing this information, right? Because you are not having this information handy. Will be scanned and you will get proper information. But if this information is critical, because for some reason it is changing the process behavior, then definitely you will be losing this information. Still, there is a way how you can manage that. You can derive the missing information through the default value functionality, but this requires on the configuration side some extra manual efforts, right? Where you have to provide this missing information for the scanner benefit to understand what has happened. So yes, you can. It is not prohibited, but in some situations this might be more difficult and more time-consuming effort to configure it in an appropriate way, just to get once the fully complete lineage out of it.
There's two questions. So one about can we harvest models from Erwin and Oracle SDDM into EDC? So Erwin is supported. We have a scanner dedicated for Erwin. Oracle SDDM is not supported at the moment. There's another question in the chat. When can we support GreenPlum 5 as part of the advanced scanner? So we do support GreenPlum stop procedure. And you can already scan stop procedure within GreenPlum. We recommend to use JDBC for harvesting the base metadata, the tables, and so on. So that is already supported today.
Any more questions?
EDC is an on-premise product today. You can also find accelerators to deploy it on the various marketplace, AWS marketplace, Azure marketplace, as well as GCP marketplace. So that's a great way to start up with the deployment, but customers are mostly deploying.
I think FMT, I mean, just to answer that question, we also have a SaaS offering, which is what we need to highlight, which is not easy.
That's correct. So we do have another offering. So as part of the IDMC platform, we have an offering that's called cloud governance and data catalog, CDGC, and you will find there the similar capabilities in terms of metadata extraction. So we do have those scanning capabilities that we have presented as part of the enterprise data catalog through those sessions that are also available. Some of them are available as well in our SaaS product. We will continue to expand and onboard those scanners as well in the cloud as we move forward.
When it comes to the performance metrics, right? So I believe we are exposing some of the measurements that we are doing internally through the documentation. But what you need to remember is that when dealing with processes, there is no one general rule to measure to compare two processes, right? Because you can imagine that you can have the same number of procedures, for example, in a particular database, but the complexity of those procedures must be extremely different, right? You can have for example, 200 very simple processes where the procedure is doing just simple either extraction of the data and exposing the result set, or is doing some very simple insert select statements. But at the same time, you can have, for example, even 100 of procedures which are calling each other, which are doing some extra dynamic elements, like through the cursors, through a number of different ways, where the logic is crazy, right? So in such a situation, the number of processes tells nothing, right? Because the complexity is completely different, and dealing with those types of frameworks is totally different, right? So although we are sharing some of the performance metrics with the customers, please always keep in mind that it is not easy exercise, right? It is not easy exercise to measure how much time will it take to process that, how much memory will be needed to process that, because you can have, it is not comparable, right? You can have the same number of processes, but at the same time, the complexity will be extremely different. So this is the when it comes to the work needed to work with the advanced scanners, right? So it is, as I mentioned, this is an iterative process, right? Which means that usually to process initial set of processes from particular technology takes more time, right? Because you need to prepare everything for those processes. Like you need to build the connection registry, you need to identify all of the databases, you need to have all of those properly mapped inside of your environment. But once it is done, right, every next package that is coming from the same application or for the same database or the same platform will be easier because you already did that job, right? And you will reuse it, right? So I would assume that at the beginning, there is more time needed to trigger everything, right? And to get up to speed. And once everything is set up, once you have the first set of processes handled, then every next set is going much quicker, right? So yeah, please be prepared that at the beginning, the deployment for initial set of elements will be a bit longer, right? It may take, I don't know, from days to a couple of weeks, depending on what you would like to tackle at the beginning, right? But every next element that you will be adding will be much quicker because whatever has been done before will be reused by the following stages. So that's how would I look at it. We can do scanning in parallel. Is that correct? Of course we can, right? So in advanced scanner, there is even you can properly configure that, right? Let me show you my screen again, just to show you one additional cool thing, right? If you will see the screen right here, right? Let me show you, for example, SQL Server, and let's go into any configuration, right? Edit. So first of all, for each and every configuration, we are defining if a particular processing is parallel safe, right? Which means that what we are having here is a typical, you are building a queue of executions, right? Whenever you are triggering the advanced scanner, it doesn't matter if from UI or from the command line, right? From the scheduler, you are always adding your process to an advanced scanner's execution queue, right? And inside of the configuration, server configuration, you have to define how many parallel executions you are allowing to be triggered. This is important because you need to secure enough resources, especially memory, for each and every process to be utilized, right? And for example, if in your configuration you have assigned that you have 8 GB of memory dedicated for each and every processing, if you will allow 8 processes to be triggered at the same time, please be aware that the advanced scanner will consume 64 GB of memory, right? Which means that you need to have enough memory to execute advanced scanner, plus you need to have enough memory for the operational system to work properly, and for some other applications which might be deployed on the very same server, right? So that's why there is a limit that you are defining on the server level how many of those will be picked up at the same time from the queue, right? The same time for each and every configuration, you can decide if particular configuration can be parallel safe, which means that if, for example, you will, because you can do various different ways in the advanced scanner. It is not as basic as just prepare a configuration and run it. For each and every configuration, you can define something which is called parameter sets, right? Where you can, variable sets, where you can define inside of the configuration, you can provide some parameters like here, for example, ABCD. Then inside of the parameter set, you can define particular values for this parameter. And then what would happen if you trigger this parameter set, then for each parameter value, it will trigger corresponding configuration and will substitute the parameter value of particular elements, right? And then if you were set up that this is parallel safe, then it will trigger as many processes as it is defined in your parameter set, and as many is allowed to be triggered automatically at the same time by the server, right? So, and once the first process ends, then the next one will be picked up, right? So there are ways to scan and harvest metadata automatically at the same time in parallel from few different technologies. The only thing you need to remember is that you need to, first of all, configure it in the right way. And the second thing, you need to secure enough resources to make that doable.
All right, then. So I think that was the last question, I believe.
There's one last question about security.
Okay.
So how do you ensure that the security in EDC on-prem or SaaS model? So for the on-prem products, we collect, when we collect data for profiling capabilities and so on, we do store this data completely encrypted, and we have security model that involve privileges and permissions that can be controlled within the application to allow access to this data. We do have the capability also to identify what is sensitive data and provide, we have a privilege that allows specific users to have access or not to the sensitive data, so that those information may not be shared. And again, the amount of information that we are bringing into the catalog is very limited, as we are not bringing full records of data in the catalog, but only point information that allows us to present, what is the content of a specific column, what is the statistical representation of a specific field, etc. You will see the same capabilities in the SaaS product, CDGC. Very limited amount of information is stored in our premise. We are only storing statistical results out of what we are computing from the source system, so that we have limited exposure to any risk for customers.
And there's one more question, right? Can this be run on the same server as Informatica server? Is this the best practice? Yes, it can. And just to let you know, so our customers are deploying it that way, right? So yes, you can store it on the other server, but usually our customers are storing this on the very same server. But once again, you need to secure enough resources to make that possible, right? So you need to be aware of that. And I believe that was the last question. I believe all of the questions have been answered.
And that too, just in time. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thanks to all the speakers. I mean, we would be sharing the recording for both day 1 and day 2. Along with that, Megha is preparing a FAQ document, which I believe are all the questions which are answered during the session. We will take down and share those as well. Any closing notes from Chris, Anand, you, and then we can close the call.
Thanks for the time spent on these sessions. And this is something that is quite valuable. That's the reason why we thought we would run this, for you to get an understanding. You might know some of these capabilities are there, but sometimes seeing is believing. And we would love to have you share this with your customers. Obviously, data lineage is one of the hardest problems to solve. No one claims that. I mean, if someone is claiming they can do 100% of a technology stack at any customer side, they're kidding, they're bluffing. That's what I would say. If you're able to cover 70 to 80% of a customer's landscape, at least they're focusing on the remaining 20 or 25, which is critical to address that end-to-end lineage need. So we are striving towards that, and based on customer feedback so far, we're the one who are able to get to that 60, 70%, or even 80% for that matter. And this is all possible due to this advanced scanning capability as well. So it's quite valuable. We see it as a very valuable capability. Hope you see it through too, and share it with your customers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anand. Chris, any closing notes from you? Yes, you're there.
Yeah, look, similar to Anand. Thanks everyone for attending. I think these are pretty good sessions. Thanks to the team as well, Thomas and Louis Noel and Soren, for going quite deep into all the capabilities that the scanners can do. As you can see, there's a lot there. There's a lot of pieces of information that we can pull out. So hope this was helpful. Look forward to your feedback, and look forward to connecting with you on additional training sessions in the future.